Thank you. Please be seated. I understand the first case on the list is the Crown against Snoopy, and before we swear a jury, there's a preliminary application of law.
Your Honour, yes, there's a matter of law. I think Your Honour has seen the bad character application. In short, the Crown say that both demonstrate a propensity to commit the offence for which Snoopy is currently charged, that he's more likely to be guilty of this offence on the basis of those previous convictions. Given the probative value of those previous convictions for a very similar offence, it's the prosecution's submission that the jury should be entitled to hear about those previous offences. Your Honour, can I assist any further?
No, thank you. I have had the benefit of reading your written submissions in advance, and that's been most helpful.
I'm most grateful.
Yes, has Your Honour seen my skeleton argument uploaded this week? Well, then Your Honour will know, in summary, my submissions are this. Both convictions, one is a warning, and the conviction, both of them are extremely old. Both were when Snoopy, the defendant, was a puppy. The first when he was only 2 months old, and the second when he was 9 months old. In my submission, they cannot be probative of how he would act as a mature adult dog of 3.5 years in age.
Well, thank you both for your most eloquent submissions. There's always a balancing act in the law when a defendant has previous matters as to whether those are allowed to be heard before the jury. We have to balance on one hand, as you have argued, Mr. Mason, that there is some value to indicate propensity. If the defendant has displayed behaviour of that type before, then it might be thought that that's indicative of behaviour on this occasion. On the other hand, as Ms. Nagesh, you have clearly said, there is a clear prejudicial effect of that. And I am persuaded by you in respect of the earlier of those two convictions. Clearly, Snoopy at that time was a very young puppy, and I think it would be inappropriate to allow that before the jury. But I'm afraid in respect of the more recent conviction, I do think that is permissible, and I will allow that to form part of your case, Mr. Mason.
Grateful, Your Honour.
Is there any other matters to raise, or can we now swear a jury?
I think we can swear a jury, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you please make your affirmation?
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that I will well and truly try the accused and give a true verdict according to the evidence.
You may now be seated.
Well, thank you, members of the jury. You and I will try this case together. I am the judge of the law. I'm the referee between the two parties. But you and you alone will be the judge of the facts in this case. And you will now try the case upon the evidence that is brought before you.
Well, members of the jury, I represent the Crown. My learned friend, Miss Nagesh, defends Snoopy in this case. This is a case about a mother losing her unborn lamb. That mother was Meadow Applefoot. She's a 3-year-old sheep who grazes in Cragwood. On the 19th of August, she was pregnant. You will hear how she was grazing there as usual when she was chased by a dog. That dog was continually barking, nipping at her hind legs. She was running and panicking to get away. Despite that, the dog persisted, despite his owner calling for him to return back to the car. As a result of being chased and chased and chased again, very sadly, Miss Applefoot gave birth to a stillborn lamb later that day. That dog was the defendant, Snoopy. You tell us you saw a dog and you started to describe that dog.
Yeah.
Could you help the jury with what that dog looked like?
It was a small white dog, Jack Russell sort of type. Yeah.
You kind of went like that. Is that
Yeah.
because that's the kind of size
Yeah,
of the dog?
yeah, quite small.
So quite a small dog. What's that? A metre-ish, maybe a bit less.
Yeah,
And colouring,
white.
all white.
I don't really remember. That bit was a bit of a blur.
Now, you must only tell us what you can remember. If you don't know, please don't guess.
Yeah.
May sound an obvious question, Miss Applefoot, but why were you running?
Because I was scared. I didn't want to see what might happen if I let the dog get me.
Where was the rest of the flock when you were running away from the dog that was biting you?
The flock was in front of me at the top of the hill.
How far in front of you was the rest of the flock?
To start with, about 10 metres, and then obviously I tried to run to catch up, and eventually I caught up, but they started to disperse.
Were you running at the same speed as the flock or at a different speed to the flock?
A little bit slower because I was pregnant. I couldn't keep up.
So you were running slower because you were pregnant and you couldn't keep up. So the dog is barking, biting, you're running away. How are you feeling at that time?
Stressed, intimidated, really scared. I didn't know what was going to happen.
And how did that incident end?
Tragically, with my stillborn calf.
Well, one final question then, please, Miss Applefoot. How do you feel about grazing in Cragwood now?
It's a very stressful thing for me, a little bit traumatic. It brings back everything that happened that day. It makes it hard to do.
Well, thank you for your questions, for your answers. If you wait there, my learned friend will have some more questions for you.
Would it be, when we think about how you were feeling at that point, would it be fair to say that you worked yourself up into a state?
Possibly, yes.
And it was then, as you're running, that you catch the glimpse of the dog and you hear a dog bark.
Yes.
And so is it right that in your panic state you thought the dog was nipping at your feet, but in fact he may not have been?
Possibly.
And if I said to you, it isn't true, is it, that the dog was trying to cut you off, and that was something else you thought in your panic, would you agree with me?
Not necessarily.
Do you recall that, in fact, at one point the dog veered away and was chasing a rabbit?
No, I don't recall that. I saw him chase after the other flock members, though.
All right. What I'll suggest to you actually happened is this. There was a loud bang that morning, car door, fence door. You and the other members of your flock panicked, got worked up into a frenzy. And I'd suggest to you that in the middle of all of this panic, when you saw a dog, you thought the dog was trying to attack you. But in fact, you were wrong.
Can you repeat after me, please? I am the animal friend of Snoopy,
I am the animal friend of Snoopy,
and on behalf of Snoopy,
and on behalf of Snoopy,
promise to tell the truth, the whole truth,
promise to tell the truth, the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Now, has your human taught you any commands?
Yes, I've had some formal training where I've learnt a lot of commands and did very well at the training, so much so that I actually go back on a regular basis to see the rest of the class as an example of what good the training can do.
Great. Do you find it easy then to obey commands?
Yes, generally, yes.
Now, I want to ask you about, first of all, back in January 2016, we know that you were convicted of livestock worrying, so sheep worrying. Can you tell us, first of all, how old were you then?
I was less than 9 months old, so I was very young.
And can you tell us something about why you committed that offence?
I didn't really. I mean, I was very young, and I didn't really understand what was happening. I didn't really know, because I was so young. I didn't understand the consequences of what was happening, how I might be scaring the sheep or anything like that. So that's all really. I didn't really know what I was doing because I was so young.
Can you just tell us what punishment you received?
I had a behaviour order put on me, which meant that I had to go to sessions to help me understand things from the sheep's point of view, so I could understand the impact of my behaviour on the sheep, which helped a lot.
Now, Snoopy, I want to ask you about 19th of August 2018. Now, there's no dispute that you were in the field with the sheep, including Mrs. Applefoot. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, can you just tell us what you thought when you first saw the sheep?
I just thought it was a chance to play, to run around with the sheep.
And we all agree that you did chase the sheep. Why did you chase them?
I wasn't really chasing them. I was running around with them. They'd actually started running, and then I ran after them. So it wasn't really that I chased them. It was more that they started running and I started running.
Okay. And did you make any noise?
I was barking a little bit, but not aggressively. Just in a fun, playful way. I wasn't growling or anything like that.
Well, how did the sheep seem to you in terms of their emotion that you could tell?
They seemed fine. They didn't seem to be distressed. They seemed to be running around and enjoying things in the same way that I was enjoying things.
You completed a dog training course, didn't you?
That's right.
And you've told us the importance of listening to your owner.
Yes.
Understanding commands of your owner.
Yes.
So much so that you are a good example to other dogs
Yes.
going back to the training course.
Yes.
As part of that example, do you show those other dogs how to worry sheep?
No.
Because you've done it before, haven't you?
When I was much younger.
You've done it before, haven't you?
Yes. When I was much younger.
And you were given a puppy referral order.
Yes.
And during that referral order, you've told us that you understood things from the sheep's point of view.
That's right.
Do sheep like playing with dogs?
They certainly seem to like playing with larger dogs.
Do sheep like playing with Jack Russells running around barking at them?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, yes. It's your evidence, is it, that sheep like being chased around by dogs barking at them?
I'm not an expert on sheep, so I couldn't really say.
So you think from a sheep's point of view that they would be happy for a Jack Russell to chase them, bark at them, and they would consider that to be playing. Is that what you're asking this jury to believe, Snoopy?
From my most recent experience, yes.
I see. What about the experience when you pleaded guilty to worrying sheep? Were you playing with them then as well?
I thought I was, but I didn't really understand because I was very young.
Well, come on, Snoopy. You pleaded guilty to that offence. You accepted you were worrying sheep. But now you're telling us that you weren't really worrying, you're only playing, are you?
There was absolutely no intent to worry.
Well, you pleaded guilty to the offence.
This time there was no intent, that's what I mean.
see. How do you feel when you get chased by another animal or a person? Frightened?
Not always, no.
I didn't ask you about always. When you're chased by a dog or a human, at some point, you're worried about that, aren't you? Because you wouldn't be running away otherwise, would you?
It could be a game.
But it's not always a game, is it?
Might be.
So, members of the jury, the time is fast approaching when you will now have to make a very important decision. Because you, members of the jury, randomly selected to perform the most important of civic functions, and that is cast judgment on a fellow animal in this court today, with all the consequences that follows from that. And it is right, firstly, that your decision is an objective one. You must put any personal sympathy to one side. Of course, you will naturally feel sympathy for Meadow Applefoot and the tragedy that arose from that, but you must be dispassionate in that. You may, on the other hand, also have some sympathy for the defendant, who had a somewhat troubled upbringing before, to some extent, turning life around. But again, put that to one side and just focus objectively on the evidence, because that is what in your oath you have undertaken to try this case upon.
There's a difference between nipping and biting, and there's also a difference between high-pitched barking and growling. So I'm not quite certain that it was with intent.
I've seen no evidence whatsoever to suggest that he knew that the sheep was pregnant, but absolutely knew that that sheep would be expecting to suffer as a result of being chased.
I also really don't think it's fair to say she's done it before, so she won't do it again. Considering that she has been with her human for so long, she would understand commands, and all animals are capable of learning, so why would she just continue to not understand?
But the initial situation where we had the loud bang, I think when this whole incident started, I don't see that it was only Snoopy creating this kind of stress in the flock.
Because also, am I right in remembering that the eyewitness said that they thought Snoopy was amongst the sheep, so no one can really say that she was actually singling Meadow Applefoot out. There's only Meadow Applefoot that says, I think I saw Snoopy nipping my heels. But there was other sheep, apparently, wasn't there, according to the witness on her, who were also running. So this is like, did Snoopy single Meadow Applefoot out? Because I'm unconvinced about that as well.
We don't have a rabbit witness, but...
One of the issues I have is consistency within the testimony.
My understanding is that there was a massive gap between the sheep and the flock. So Snoopy's not isolated the sheep. The sheep's become isolated herself due to her incapacity to run due to the pregnancy. So that's not the same as picking something up.
Okay, could the foreperson please stand? Just answer the following question, please. Have you reached a verdict upon which you are all agreed?
No.
Thank you. Are you able to indicate the split between guilty and not guilty?
5 guilty, rest not guilty.
Thank you. Well, that's neither a unanimous or a majority verdict, so you've been unable to reach a determination in this case. I'll turn then to the prosecution. What is the intention of the prosecution? Will you be seeking a retrial in this case?
Your Honour, yes, I've taken instructions, and the instructions are the prosecution will be seeking a retrial.
Thank you. All right. Well, that will take place in some time. Is the defendant on bail?
He is. She is, rather, yes.
Thank you. And are there any conditions on that bail?
Simply not to enter the field in which Miss Meadowfoot resides.
Thank you. Well, I think that's appropriate. Thank you. Right, court case dismissed. Thank you.